Hi, I'm back with you guys to read you chapter 27, The Sisters Grimm. As far as Mrs. Campbell knew, Brie was spending the weekend at her friend Stacy's house. Even though Brie and Stacy hadn't been friends since the 6th grade, Mrs. Campbell was so excited that her daughter was socializing again, she didn't ask any questions. Little did Miss Campbell know, after only a week free from being grounded, Brie was already planning another great excursion. Naturally, she thought of calling Cornelia Grimm first, but her phone number wasn't listed in any directory that Brie could find. She had no choice but to go to 1729 Mystic Lane, Willow Grove, Connecticut, and pray Cornelia was still living there. Brie planned the whole trip on her computer Thursday after school. She was thankful for technology. She didn't know how kids managed to run away before the internet. She found the address of the sourdough factory the Storybook Grill bought from. Willow Grove was only a bus ride away, and Cornelia's house was roughly an hour's walk from the center of town. Friday morning, Brie packed her bag with snacks and extra change of clothes. As soon as the school bell rang, she sprinted to the Storybook Grill and waited behind the dumpster in the back. Just like Iris had said, the delivery truck for Sam's New England sourdough arrived that afternoon. The delivery man was young and round and wore a white uniform with a red bow tie. He raised the back door of his truck and loaded a cart with boxes of bread. He rolled the cart down the ramp off the truck and into the diner. He took his time once he was inside. Brie peeked in the window and saw him flirting with Petunia. Brie figured that it was her chance to sneak aboard the delivery truck. She found a small space behind a stack of damaged boxes and hid there. The delivery man returned 20 minutes later and locked the truck up, clueless to the additional passenger. He started the engine and pulled away from the Storybook Grill and headed back to the factory. Brie was on her way to Connecticut with no plan of how she would return. It took 2 days for the truck to reach the northeastern state. The delivery man stopped occasionally to eat and rest, but he was very determined to make it back in good time. Brie even heard him lying to a dispatcher about his estimated time of arrival. The worst part with Brie's journey was sneaking on and off the truck to find a restroom. She waited until the delivery man was either asleep in the back seat or eating in a restaurant. Every time she left the truck, she was terrified it would be gone when she returned. Despite it being stressful and cramped way to travel, it still gave Brie quite a thrill. She hadn't had such an adrenaline rush since she traveled around Europe with Connor. She just wished he were here with her to keep her company. Finally, on Sunday morning, the truck pulled into Sam's New England sourdough factory. As soon as the truck was parked, Brie raised the back door from the inside and darted out. "Thanks for the ride," she said as she passed the delivery man. "Hey, how long have you been in there?" he yelled after her. "Come back here." He was too slow to chase after her, and Brie ran to the nearest bus stop. She waited only a few minutes for the next bus to arrive. The bus drove into the small and quiet town of Willow Grove and dropped her off at the center of town. She pulled a map that she had printed out of her bag and followed it a little ways out of town, heading for Cornelia's house. The Connecticut countryside was a beautiful place to walk. There was a rolling hills of green trees all around her as far as she could see. Brie eventually found Mystic Lane. It was a wide residential street with large homes and spacious lots. All the houses were elegant but old. Some looked like they had been there since before the United States was formed. 1723, 1725, 1727. Brie read the addresses as she passed them, which brings us to 1729. The house had a large hedge around its yard, making it much more private than all the other homes on the street. Brie went through a small gate and stepped onto the front lawn. There was a large 2-story house with big windows and a wide front porch. The house was painted yellow and the front yard was covered in ornaments. There were colorful wind chimes, garden gnomes, bird baths, and statues of fairies spread throughout the flower beds. It was very homey, and Brie felt very comfortable here, strangely comfortable. "This must be it," she said to herself. Brie pulled out the old photograph of her grandmother and Cornelia. She held it up to the house and sighed with relief. It matched perfectly, like an old piece in a new puzzle. The house had been fixed up over the years, but Brie was definitely in the right place. She walked up the porch steps and knocked on the door. Brie's heart was racing. She prayed she hadn't traveled all this way for nothing. A middle-aged woman with spiky red hair answered the door. She wore a maroon sweater and dangling ruby teardrop earrings. "May I help you?" she asked. "Hello, my name is Brie Campbell, and I was wondering if a woman named Cornelia Grimm lived here at this address." "Why do you ask?" "I think we're cousins," Brie said. "I was hoping she could answer a few questions for me about our family." I'm sorry to barge in like this, but I didn't know how else to track her down. I've traveled a really long way to get here." "Yes, Cornelia's here," she said. "Come in, I'll get her for you. My name's Wanda." They shook hands and Wanda escorted Brie inside. Her spirits soared knowing Cornelia was still alive. Her journey hadn't been a waste. The house had floral wallpaper and white trim. There were large vases of flowers placed on every surface. The walls were covered in framed photos and not a single frame was alike. Each picture was of a different woman or groups of women who had lived in the house over the decades. Brie recognized one of the women immediately. "That's my grandmother," Brie said. She showed Wanda the picture of Cornelia and her grandmother. Wanda smiled at her. "Oh, you're Annalise's granddaughter," she said. "Cornelia will be thrilled you've come to visit. Follow me, she's in the sitting room." They entered a room filled with large, comfy furniture. There was at least 6 cats that Brie counted, but she assumed that there were probably more in other parts of the house. Another middle-aged woman was sitting on a couch reading a book. She was plump and had dark hair that was graying at the temples. "Frenda, this is Brie Campbell," Wanda introduced. "Brie, this is my cousin Frenda, Cornelia's daughter." "Hello there," Frenda said, surprised at the company. "Hi," Brie said and shook her hand. "Aunt Cornelia, you have a visitor," Wanda said. "This is Brie Campbell. She's Annalise's granddaughter." Cornelia Grimm was seated in the back of the room. She faced an easel and was in the middle of painting a landscape of some kind. She turned to face the girls, and Brie instantly recognized her. She was very old now, but still looked similar to her grandmother's picture. She had long white hair down to her waist. She wore red-framed glasses and a stylish silk scarf was wrapped around her neck. Cornelia was delighted to meet Brie. She retrieved her cane and stood to greet her. "Hello, child," Cornelia said with a sweet smile. "What a lovely surprise. I was just thinking about your grandmother this morning." "I'm so happy to finally meet you," Brie said. "You were my grandmother's cousin, right?" "Yes," Cornelia said. "We were very close when we were young, but unfortunately lost touch over the years. Is she well?" "Actually, she passed away a few years ago," Brie was sad to share. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," Cornelia said with a sigh. "Well, she's in a better place now. What brings you to the house?" Brie hesitated, not sure how to put it. "I found a letter you wrote to my grandmother at this address," she said. "I have a lot of questions about our family, and since she's not around anymore, I was hoping you could answer them for me. I would have just called, but you weren't listed anywhere." "I hate solicitors," Cornelia said. "We would be happy to answer any questions you have. Let's have a seat." Cornelia sat beside Frenda on the couch. Brie and Wanda took over the chairs across from them. The women were all ears, and Brie could tell they were eager to hear what questions she had. It wasn't every day that a young woman appeared at their doorstep seeking their help. "I suppose I should just start with the biggest question on my mind," Brie said. "Grimm isn't a common name, so I was wondering if our family was related to the brothers Grimm." "As a matter of fact, yes," Cornelia said. "Wilhelm Grimm was Annalise and my 4th great-grandfather." Once again, Brie's spirits soared so high she could have levitated into the air. This was the answer she was hoping to get. Everything made sense now. "That's incredible," Brie said with relief. "Are you from Germany as well?" "My grandparents moved to the United States when they were young, but your grandmother was the first of her family," Cornelia explained. "Before she met your grandfather, she came to live with us in this house." "I figured as much from the letters," Brie said. "I noticed all the photos of women in the hall. Was this some kind of sorority?" "Sort of," Cornelia said. "The house first belonged to my mother and her sisters. Many of our relatives have lived here over the years, and a strong majority of them were women. I'm sure our neighbors have thought that we were a coven from time to time." Cornelia, Frenda, and Wanda all shared a laugh, but Brie didn't join them. Instead, she eyed the women nervously. "Are you witches?" Brie asked in all seriousness. The room went very quiet. The women shared a look that gave Brie an unsettling feeling. There was definitely a secret among them. "Sorry, I hope that wasn't rude," Brie said. "Whatever you are, it's none of my business. Recently, I learned a lot about the brothers Grimm, more than most people would believe. I know the Grimm family has capabilities other families don't." "Are you talking about the magic in our family's blood?" Cornelia asked. The hairs on Brie's arms suddenly stood up. "Yes," she said. "You know about that?" All 3 women nodded. "It's a story that's been passed down in our family from generation to generation," Frenda said. "The brothers Grimm didn't write the stories they published, but they were given to them by fairies from another world. In the early 19th century, the Grand Army caught wind of this world and tried to conquer it. So a fairy transferred magic from her blood into Wilhelm Grimm so that he could help the fairies trap the approaching army. That magic still runs through our family's veins to this day." It's not enough magic to cast her spell or an enchantment, Wanda said, but we know it's inside of us somewhere, and it separates us from everyone else in the world. Brie stared at them in shock. She thought she was the only person in the other world who knew the story. I'm curious to how you knew the family secret before you knew you were in the family, Cornelia said with a laugh. After your grandmother left this house, she was very adamant that she wouldn't tell her future children. Magic always frightened her. I assumed she changed her mind but left some of the details on her explanation out. No, Brie said. She never said a word about it. I found out completely on my own. It's a long story, but last year I went into the fairy tale world. The women gasped and sat on the edge of their seats. This was a game changer, even for them. Brie was the first person they had ever known who traveled into the fairy tale world. You crossed over? Wanda asked. But how? Brenda asked. Brie told her relatives about her trip to Germany with her school and her adventures with Connor and Emmerich. She told them how they had traveled into the fairy tale world through a portal inside New Westenstein Castle. She explained that once she returned to the other world, she remembered hearing that Mother Goose had rigged the portal to trap any person of non-magical blood inside of it for 200 years. Having magic in their blood was the only explanation of how Emmerich and Brie traveled through the portal so effortlessly, which led Brie to believe she and Emmerich were descendants of Wilhelm Grimm. It was a long-winded answer, but the women were completely captivated. How is your friend Connor related to magic? Cornelia asked. He and his twin sister are the fairy godmother's grandchildren, Brie said. Fascinating, Brenda said. Tell me about it, Brie said. They were the first children born of both worlds, and their birth somehow connected the two. Apparently time in the fairy tale world used to run a lot slower, but now the worlds are in sync. How old are they? Cornelia asked. Almost 15, I think, Brie said. What does that have to do with anything? None of them answered her. Knowing the twins' ages sent Cornelia, Brenda, and Wanda deep into thought. I feel like there's something you're not telling me, Brie said. All three women suddenly stood. I think we should show Brie the guest house, Cornelia said. It'll be easier to explain the sisterhood there. The sisterhood? Brie said. Follow us, sweetheart, Wanda said. I'll continue the second half of the chapter in the next video. I'll see you guys then. Bye.